joined on WWF-Pakistan's Facebook live session with Hammad Naqi Khan, who is Director General WWF-Pakistan, and we will be talking about the water crisis in the country. So just to start off with some basic facts and figures, everyone knows, especially in the media, a lot of news has been coming up about the scarcity of water in the country. So what is the current status of Pakistan's water crisis and impacts both at the macro and micro levels?
Okay, thank you, Asma. Firstly, let me share this, that the crisis is not new, but the good or the bad thing is that it suddenly, became very active, particularly on social media. And a lot of people think that this is like a kind of a sudden, crisis. So if you look at both quality and quantity, I think there are serious challenges and issues out there. Let me start with the quantity. I think the major challenges are population growth rate. The availability of fresh water almost remains the same. The water which enters our system remains the same. Yes, we have increased pumping more water. I think at the moment, if you look at the number of tubes, which are like more than a million tubes, both in literally everywhere, they're pumping almost 55 million acre feet of water. So it used to be 5,000 cubic meter per person per year in 1950s. Now it has almost touched 1,000 cubic meter per person per year, or maybe slightly below that. Now this means that from a country which is water stressed, we are moving, we have already moved to a situation where there will be physical water scarcity, which means people will struggle to get water. So that's a crisis. And I think the population growth rate, which is still more than 2%, I would say is the major culprit, but also the competition between different water users. If you look at the situation, still 90% of the available water, fresh water, is used in our agriculture sector. Population is increasing, and the demand from industry is also increasing, which means that there will be more mouths to feed, to provide fiber, and the requirement from industry will also be more than the previous years. So the luxury that our agriculture sector used to enjoy won't be there. So that's related to the quality. And the situation becomes more challenging if you look at the overall climate change scenario, where a lot of water in our rivers comes from snow and glacial melt, compounded by the monsoon rains. So the pattern, the monsoon rain pattern, is also changing, and as we see, as we observe, that snow and glacial melt is increasing. So maybe all the models, except for a few areas and glaciers in the Karachi, the model says that there will be more water and then there will be less water. And considering all this, if you look at the vulnerability of a state, of a country, we are one of the top 3 to top 7 most vulnerable countries. Whether it's German Watch Index or other global research institutes, they put us in a zone which is already red. That's related to quantity. Now let's come to the issue of quality. We do have environmental legislation, we do have policy and regulatory frameworks, but unfortunately, like in many other areas, the enforcement is weak. The result is that most of our municipalities, cities, towns, and most of our industries, they dump their untreated wastewater into our water channels. अगर आप figures देखें जो treatment की है, वो single digit में है. I think it's like कोई reports कहती हैं कि सिर्फ 3% है, the other reports which say like it's 8%. और वो भी, I mean, this is the industry which is either, you know, export oriented or multinationals because of their corporate policies they are doing it. Same is the case with the groundwater. There's a unregulated abstraction of groundwater. You know, people, industry, companies are free to pump water in most areas. And then because they're free, they're pumping water, they're pumping more water, and the untreated, you know, affluents and sewage is also contaminating. The result is that the shallow groundwater is also contaminated. So there's a huge percentage of, you know, people, communities who depend on this groundwater for all their daily chores or, you know, drinking and all that stuff. So these are the, you know, challenges both at the micro and at the macro level, which as a country we are facing.
Okay, so as you pointed out as well, a lot of water is used by the agricultural sector, and a lot of water is wasted in the agricultural sector. How can an economy like ours, that is heavily dependent on agriculture, turn into a water efficient sector?
So I'm always reluctant to use the term water efficiency, because even if you improve the efficiency, there's a tendency to bring more area, you know, under agriculture. So as a water professional, I prefer to use the term water productivity, which is like we need to really increase and improve the water productivity, which is more dropper when we consider, or more fiber per liter, or more production units per unit of water. So it's like we are talking about increasing the productivity. Now, yes, agriculture sector, if you look at some of the agronomic practices, I think they are obsolete. There are farmers who still use flood irrigation. A lot of land is still not leveled. A lot of our water courses are still not lined. There's a lot of wastage. There's a lot of loss during when the water is released and when the water enters the field of a grower. So that's one thing. The second is the choice of crops. So I think yes, there are progressive farmers who going for high value crops, whether they're fruit orchards or some of the vegetables or some oil seeds or flowers, things like that. But there's still a majority of them who do not want to change, the practices or the crops which their forefathers used to grow. If we have surplus wheat, and if the price of wheat in international market is less, we still, there's a strong tendency to still grow more wheat and store it. And people, very freely link that to food security. Yeah, as a big country, we need to be food secure. We need to be water secure as well. So, एक वो चीज़ है. I think urgent need है. We need to revisit our cropping pattern. Monocrops वही है, 50 साल से मेरा दादा ये करता था, मेरा वालिद भी यही कर रहा है, मैं भी ये करूँगा, मेरे बच्चे भी यही करेंगे. So I think उस mindset से we need to come out of that mindset. So high value crops में जाने की ज़रूरत है. और उसके बाद के even if you look at the current practices, yes, there are a few practices which are kind of sophisticated, or temperature or power or something, जैसे sprinklers or drip. But there are others like bed and furrow, like trench plantation, so many others. Leveling of land, जिनको हम follow करके, growers follow करके, and that's the message which the extension people should, take it to the end users, which are the farmers. So I think agriculture sector की, yes, because you use the word efficiency, irrigation efficiency बढ़ाने की ज़रूरत है. Irrigation intensity भी हमारी को standardized नहीं है. We need to revisit that, because just because of the intensity, we have seen particularly in Sindh, a lot of areas become waterlogged and saline. So उसको भी देखने की ज़रूरत है.
There's also a lot of debate recently on social media and the print media, electronic media as well, about dams and Calabar Dam, and so is the construction of Calabar Dam one of the main solutions, and if not, what other hard engineering measures can be taken to resolve or to try to work with this, find a solution for this crisis?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So one sees sudden hype, and people, a lot of people, particularly our social media activists, becoming water experts and saying that, Kalabagh Dam is the solution. So I think there should be science behind such statements. Yes, as an environmentalist, as a water engineer, I know if you look at our storage capacity, we haven't built a major dam after the big reservoirs, Tarbela and Mangla, should built like almost 40-50 years ago. And they, because of sedimentation, they have, in fact, we have reduced our storage capacity. People can also give the examples of our neighbor, India. We have a 30-day storage in India, 100 days or 300 days storage. Different examples, different countries. India has already, X hundred dams and X hundred or 1,000, are in the pipeline. So yes, we need to improve our storage. I mean, no debate. Even as an environmentalist, I'm saying this. It's not that dam A is good and dam B is bad. I think whenever we decide about a certain dam, a certain water reservoir or storage, we should treat the social environmental impact as an excellent planning tool instead of treating it as a formality, as just a checklist, a box which needs to be ticked. If we do that, and if we reach out to consensus and decision through a consultative mechanism, yes, but it's not the statements which a lot of people make. There's a tendency people take extreme positions and then they stick to the guns. So there's a kind of school of thought, a group of people who say that every drop of water which goes beyond Kotri or which goes into the sea is wasted. So this set of people. Then there's another set of people. Again, before partition, the delta used to get 50 million acre feet or 40 million acre feet. This is our right, and we should get, 40 or 50 million acre feet. Both are totally, wrong. The solution lies in the middle. We have to, and there has already been, a lot of research been done. We know the quantity of water which is required to stop seawater intrusion. We know the quantity of water which is required to keep the Indus Delta ecoregion in a healthy shape. So we need to ensure that those flows are maintained. Then there is another, and I kind of tend to agree with that we also need storage to regulate and to ensure that we maintain that environmental flow. So coming back to your question, storage, but that's not the solution. I think people talk about integrated river basin management, people talk about integrated water resource management. I think we need to look into this issue in a holistic manner. Because again, there is another group of people who say, okay, forget the dams, just manage the water which is available, improve the efficiency and productivity, and all the challenges will be addressed, all the problems will be solved. And then the other one which says, forget management, I think we are already doing very good, just construct more dams because of the climate change, sometimes we have wet years, we need to store water. But as I say, I think there are plus points and there are minus points. So the solution lies in the middle. Yes, we need to improve storage, but we need to improve the way we manage and govern our water resources. I think the status quo and the business as usual won't, lead us to anywhere. Unfortunately, we'll be doomed. So that's my response, to that.
Okay, so just adding to what you were saying as well, Is water pricing a viable option for a country like Pakistan at, let's say, the industry level as well as the household level? Is that the way that we can manage the resource better?
Definitely.
Yeah.
This is a sensitive issue. This has always been a sensitive issue, but this is not something, which we should, close our eyes. We need to. The politicians are afraid to touch that, because if they increase the abiana, and the fact is that most of these big farmers, they sit in the parliament, and that's the reason that they don't want to, increase the abiana. A lot of industrialists sit in the parliament, or they have friends, and they don't want that the groundwater is priced or groundwater, abstraction is regulated. That's not the solution, honestly. Every person, as a consumer, as an industrialist, as a grower, literally every individual who uses water has to pay. Now, this is the one sweeping statement which I'm making. The other side, but the flip side is that access to, particularly to water or to drinking water, is a basic human right. Even our constitution provides us this right. The state should ensure that every citizen of this country has access to potable water. Now, so the poor people who can't afford, it doesn't mean that they don't have the money. So that, for them, it should be subsidized. The drinking water should be accessible. So people should get drinking water. If they can't afford it, it doesn't matter, they don't get it. But the people who live in big houses, as an individual, I see my neighbors, and sometimes my driver is, washes my car 2 times a day with a running pipe. That's not affordable. That's not on. Similarly, a grower, if he uses flood irrigation and he wastes like 50% of the water, that's not on. Industrialist, if it's a single line production unit, you pump water, you use it, you throw it, instead of having a closed loop where you use water, you treat water, and then you reuse that. So that's not on. So we need to be a closed loop society. So pricing, I think, is a must. If there's a pricing, people will use the water in the manner it should have been used.
Recently, Pakistan's water policy was announced. So this was many years in the making.
Yes.
So is this something that is going to help us in getting to a more water efficient, to being a more water efficient country, or is it something that is a little too late?
It's never too late. This is the national water policy signed by all the chief ministers and all the relevant people. Now, I remember reviewing the first draft in, I think, 2011 or 12. But I also remember, I think the initiative was taken like in 2005 or 6. So, long time. We have policy for everything, but we didn't have the national water policy. So I'm very happy that at least we have a document. Now, looking at the document, it's a comprehensive document. It's like, it covers everything under the sun. It has, I think, more than 30 priorities. And now, if you have so many priorities, it's like a laundry list. Then you do not have a priority. So that's, one issue. The second is, and this is like, kind of when even people like me, when we criticize something, that we already have, a lot of policies. Even if you look at water was covered under the National Environmental Policy, and we have a National Drinking Water Policy, we have a Climate Change Policy which came like in 2012. If you enforce those policies in the true spirit, maybe you do not need that, but I'm so happy that we do have this document fully endorsed by all the provinces. Now, the point is, prioritize few things, enforce them. This is a good, guiding document. Water is a provincial subject after the 18th Amendment. The direction, the guidance, the will should be there for its enforcement. And maybe prioritizing, few things under this good comprehensive document, and then ensuring that, that we implement that document. Just to give you one example, it also talks about the National Water Council. Good, we should have. It has to be a representative council. But we have Pakistan Environmental Protection Council headed by the Chief Executive, the Prime Minister. We've seen the council doesn't meet for years. So then what's the point of having a document and having a forum which doesn't meet? So I think learning lessons from the past policy frameworks, because this is a very important, this is the subject of our survival. It's not something which is, kind of flashy or which is like Western. This is critical. Okay,
so we have a question coming in from the comments, and the question is if you could talk about the recycling of water in Karachi as well as seawater, and how perhaps that can be used for a city like Karachi.
I think a good question. So even you look at states who do not have fresh water. I mean, we are very fortunate to have fresh water. Take the example of the Middle East countries, UAE, or for that matter, Singapore. So maybe they have resources, but they have put up like huge desalination plants. We have coast, we can use renewable energies, but it's not that because we already have energy crisis, we can't put up desalination plants. That's not the solution. We have a resource which we need to exploit in a sustainable manner. We need to put up desalination plant. We need to use the renewable sources of energy to maybe to run that. It's not that that we are putting up this K4 pipeline and from Kinjar and from Chutiari we can get water. We have already seen crisis, and we need to address tankers mafia is another issue which requires another long debate. But the issue in Karachi can't be resolved until and unless A, we address the tankers mafia, and B, we go ahead with the desalination plants.
Okay, thank you for that. Just coming down to the immediate actions, what steps should be taken by the corporate sector, industries and the government to ensure that we don't run out of water by 2025?
So recently we have a bad example of Cape Town. Cape Town became, the headline, Cape Town became the first city in the world which really ran out of water. People, particularly countries like us, we need to learn from that example. So as I said earlier, for corporates, it's not just for corporates but also for the agriculture sector. If we go ahead and regulate groundwater abstraction, I think that's urgently required. The second thing is the polluting the existing sources and resources, whether it's a lake, canal, or river. Private sector they do business, they make money. Most of them. A lot of them, they say they don't make money, but then why are they doing business? So it's not just a matter of corporate social responsibility that they should ensure that they use water in an efficient manner, closed loop, and B, they do not pollute. And even having a phased approach where first they address issues within their premises, within their boundaries, and then as part of their corporate social responsibility, going beyond the boundaries, addressing the water challenges of the community, addressing the water challenges at the basin level, at a watershed level manner. That's very important. Second thing is that for many businesses, it's not just a reputational risk that company A is not treating water or company A is not using water in an efficient manner. It's a business risk as well. The whole business, their production, sometimes their services, it depends on water. How would they do business if they don't have water? So I think they need to take this as a business risk, and then try to help the government. And obviously there's also a blame game when they say that the municipalities and the government departments or the government entities, they are not fulfilling their responsibilities and they are not treating the wastewater. Why should we do? So I think we need to end this blame game and we need to take actions.
So if I am a corporate, then how can WWF help me if I'm an industrialist actually take some of these steps to conserve water?
So not just it's a good question. Let me take this opportunity and say we treat water as the biggest environmental challenge of this country, and that's the reason that WWF-Pakistan's water program is the most dynamic. It's one of the big programs that we are working on. We are working with farmers to promote efficient agronomic and efficient irrigation practices. We picked up cotton, but now we are moving towards rice and other crops and commodities, working with more than 100,000 farmers, bringing the global sustainability production standards, training, educating with agriculture department, the growers. That's with the agriculture sector. The second is a program, water stewardship program, where we're working with the corporate sector. At the moment, we have a big program where we're working with the textile and leather industry, doing audits, and then on the basis of audit, coming up with solutions and demonstration units, how to reduce their water consumption, how to treat water consumption. It's not just water and energy, but let me focus on water. So that's where. And then as an advocacy organization, we do a lot of lobbying, also. And for that purpose, we also need support. Support from individuals, support from organizations, support from private sector, for having a good policy regulatory framework, just to ensure that we have an enabling environment, just to ensure that the key players perform their duties, understand their responsibilities, implement the water efficient programs. There are so many things, use us, approach us, where we can provide you support, guide you, advise you. We are there where we can learn from you. If you have done good examples, tell us, share with us. We, as an organization, we can advocate for that, we can propagate, we can widely disseminate, that kind of information.
Another question that just came in through the Facebook session. We talked about water pricing, but how can water pricing be linked specifically to agriculture? To conservation and conservation for agriculture?
Okay, both. So for agriculture, it's like basically the whole system is supply based. Okay, I'm a farmer, this much water is available, this is my Varabandi, this is my Moga, and I've been allocated water on the basis of supply. So we need to revisit that and maybe align it with demand-based system. And if you look at Abiana is negligible. So what the price of water is not incorporated, when the cost of production of a certain commodity is calculated. Yes, there's always a debate that most of the farmers, they're small land holding and they can't afford. So, but there are always solutions. Solutions which have been implemented. So as a farmer, same is the good case with industrialists. If they are using groundwater, like industrialists in Karachi, they are paying and they use tankers and they use water efficiently. Suppose a lot of textile industry in Lahore, they pump water because they just pay for the diesel or for the electricity, but they don't pay for the water, which the industrialists in Karachi pay. So if you look at their water consumption is more. So that's where you pay for water and you conserve water because it's just like a raw material, And same goes with the individual consumer. If you live in a house and you water your garden 3 times a day, you wash your car every day, then you have to pay for that. It's not that people don't have access to drinking water, and then there's a huge majority who use this precious potable water for all purposes.
So a third question that's come in relates to wastewater treatment plants. What kind of investments are required? Can Pakistan make those investments? Can individuals or can industrialists and corporate sectors make that investment? Is it a realistic solution to part of our problem?
There are so many examples. I quoted one that export-oriented industry or the international multinationals, they treat their wastewater. Maybe we have examples, the same size of textile units. I can give you the example of Faisalabad on one of the drains. So one, supplies fabric to an international brand. So, they have all the good system in place. They have made investments, put up a treatment plant, and then they put the treated water into that drain. And then there are the neighbors who cater for the local market with the same, kind of production facility. They haven't made that investment, and they put their untreated wastewater into that drain. Obviously, he's annoyed, the exporter, that he's obviously it needs to be enforced across the board, cost-effective indigenous solutions. I mean, just to give you one example, as part of the River Ravi Commission, we proposed that. These are our own research institutes like DIPG. They've come up with a solution which is like the constructed wetlands or floating bed technologies. There are plants which uptake heavy metals. There's so many examples, but somebody, needs to ensure that because the laws are enforced, that such solutions, they become mainstream. The people demonstrate such solutions. And demonstration is there, but the pilots are there. But these pilots need to be scaled up. That's where the role of the government and civil society organizations like WWF is key.
Another question which you touched upon a little bit was regarding storage capacities at Kalabagh Dam. So what are the alternatives to store water besides building these constructed?
Well, obviously alternatives of people will shoot me if I say that there's Kalabagh Dam, or sorry, the big reservoirs, the big dams are not required. I think I've addressed that. But there are also other alternatives. There are small dams, and it's not that we haven't built those small dams. You find hundreds of small dams. I remember there used to be a time when there used to be a pond, near a village, and at that point in time, it was not a pond which, these days the pond receives just the sewage, but it used to store rainwater. Similarly, in even countries like you go to Nepal, every house has a rainwater harvesting system. So they store water and then they obviously use that water. So from an individual level to the community level, check dams, there are different technologies, different techniques available. But I would still say that storage, yes, we need to improve that.
So how much of monsoon water are we wasting currently, and what are
So the reality is that these are if you stretch it, it's a 3 months period where we get, the monsoon. And this is the period, or the period just before monsoon, where the temperature is high and a lot of water from the snow and glacier melt also comes into our system. So we're talking about these like few months where we get most of the water. So when there are years when there's a lot of water, maybe more than which is required to keep ecological balance in the delta, or which goes into the sea. So we need to rationalize that, everywhere, and there's like proper, scientific techniques available to assess the requirement of water, to maintain the baseline flows or environmental flows. I think we need to ensure that we maintain that, in the river, and for that matter, all the rivers, ideally, we need, we maintain that, and then, we also store water.
One of the questions, another question that came in related to, you were talking about constructed wetlands, and whether such solutions can be used in Karachi to treat wastewater.
Well, it depends on the, if it's because sometimes it requires land. So where availability of land is an issue, there you go for maybe sophisticated technologies which range from trickling filters or activated sludge, or which is like more power intensive. But where the land is available, yes, anywhere. We proposed a site to Vasa for River Ravi, and I think the court gave this direction, and Vasa is, I believe that they're going ahead with that pilot.
So what is the minimum land requirement for such a?
Well, again, it depends. We're talking about few hectares to, you know, maybe dozen of hectares. Yeah.
There's also recently been debate about the kind of species we plant, like the trees that we plant, and how they also you know, use up or absorb the water. That's also one of the reasons why perhaps in certain areas the issues that weren't there before. So are there certain species we should be planting, should not be planting for water conservation as well?
I think we, as an environmental organization, we always say that go for indigenous, the native, you know, species. But again, it depends. Sometimes in an, you know, so people talk about, you know, eucalyptus, poplar, people talk about congo because to meet the certain forestry targets and urban forestry targets, we ended up planting all these species. And even, you know, eucalyptus in areas where the groundwater was already depleting. And yes, it's a fact that, you know, eucalyptus consumes a lot of water. But in an area which is already degraded, or in an area which needs to be reclaimed, or which is waterlogged, I think eucalyptus is the ideal solution. So case by case basis, but in most cases, like for individuals or for government departments, I think fruits, trees, indigenous, native species, and there's a list available for Karachi, list available for Islamabad, list available for Lahore, for literally all geographies, all different ecoregions.
Okay, so just in closing, the last question, what can individuals do at their level to help with the conservation of water? What are the small actions they can take?
Okay, let me repeat the few statements, because I think the children that participate in our Spellathon program, these young kids, I mean, I think, I was so excited, I was so happy that they are more aware. And one of the, you know, the parents, he came to me and said, you know, my girl is like a 3rd grade, and she came to me, and, you know, I was just, you know, in the toilet, I was shaving, and she said, why your tap is open? You know, how many liters of water you have already wasted? So there are small things, you know. Yes, we need to aware our, not just our children, but literally everyone, our friends, our peers, our family members, our servants, our workers, our children, to conserve water. Is a precious source. We can't afford to waste it. Individual actions range, you know, they range from taking long showers to switching off the tap when you're brushing your teeth, or you know, shaving your beard. So there's so many things. Recently there was a tweet which got viral with the German ambassador. You know, he just shared a picture. He was using a bucket to wash his you know, car, and he said, if I can. It's the Pakistanis who need to do that. So there are so many things, honestly. I think we also, from time to time, share a lot of information on our Facebook post and on our website, in our interaction with school kids or with community, wherever we find an opportunity, or such interactions, or in the media. And I think for media also, the PEMRA rules are very clear. They need to spend the next percentage of their time on public service messaging. This is not an issue for WWF as an environmental. This is, as a Pakistani, this is my issue, this is your issue. The media should allocate time, you know, where to spread that message, spread good best practices for individuals, for industry, for farmers. So as we always say, that water is everybody's business.
So thank you so much, Hammad, for
pleasure talking to you.
The time today.